Hey guys, Bugcat7 here. Okay, it is Friday, October 2nd, 2020, and I want to thank you for visiting the Stonewall Research channel here on YouTube. I really do appreciate it. All right, guys, well, we're going to continue with part two in my series looking into the accounts of the quote unquote giants or large hominids, I like to call them, international. And we're going to look into some of these accounts from Central America and South America that were just single accounts. I put them all together, lump them in together because there's just one account from each one of these places. You have to remember too, these accounts and reports are coming from probably syndicated news service offices, foreign news service offices, and made it their way to the United States, and some, you know, dispatched from agents that they're paying to be in these places back in those times. This is a time of late 19th century of Reuters news agency, and these kinds of things are going on. Newspapers were big, and there's a lot of reporting going on, but these singular stories were the only ones that seem to make it out of there. But whether it's older accounts or newer accounts, I think find these very interesting. And there is some very, very new accounts in these reported here on Greater Ancestors, Chris Leslie's site, and we'll look at them, and then the other countries. And again, not every country is covered in these reports. So I was curious to know whether there was some foreign press on some of these accounts, and who's collating that and putting that together in Europe and elsewhere in the world. We do hear these things, but we're going to go over it on this channel. Trust me, wherever I can find these accounts, we're going to report on it here. Thanks to Chris Leslie and Greater Ancestors, who have done a lot of the work. But in any case, let's look into these things. It's very interesting, and it's interesting to discuss all the concepts and what these things may mean. But this one, I believe, comes from Nicaragua, and it's a gigantic man with head missing in the Chontales district, which is interesting in itself. Press accounts say that the skeleton of a gigantic man with a head missing has been unearthed at El Baquin on the Mico River in the Chontales district. The ribs are a yard long and 4 inches wide, and the shin bone is too heavy for one man to carry. Chontales is an Indian word meaning wild men, quote unquote. So, very interesting that this account is like this. So it seems to be like a crossover into Bigfoot territory, maybe. Robert Shepard just did a live video on Bigfoot giant connection, but I've already covered that on this channel with Native American reports of Bigfoot and giants as well, how the legends and myths and whatever have these crossovers reported of these things in Native American culture, Native people's culture in the Americas. So you have one thing there, and also the size of this thing. I mean, it's just ribs are a yard long and 4 inches wide. Well, most commonly ribs are about an inch wide or two, or maybe whatever, 4 inches wide. It's huge. And again, we have to. I just bring this to everybody's attention in many of my videos. Okay, when we think of all these megalithic constructions in the polygonal block and whatever's not polygonal block, just huge block and whatever it might be, you have to consider this, that, and it's my opinion, and because of the histories we find out in the myths in the native people's stories about the stone giants, what people take literally as stone giants. Well, this is not what they were. They obviously work with stone, and I believe that that's what the giants specialized in. Obviously, you can see many evidences of their work in the size structures, the openings in the doors themselves, and the walls, etc., are fit for people of a larger stature. In other cases, these megalithic constructions don't seem like they are for people that would be that size at all. So I'm just saying that these people specialize in this, and in a world that we can hardly imagine in the past, where things worked in this way, we have to think in similar terms to our own culture today. People who specialize in certain things, different cultures around the world, that they can only do this kind of work. So I'm just saying that it's possible that when we think in these terms, we're always thinking about how we did it. People of our stature, our height. When the history of height, which I've covered on this channel, tells us that average size for peoples had not changed since the Stone Age to 1800, when people were average sized males from Europe were 5'3" to 5'5" tall, with the Irish being a little bit taller, 5'6", 5'7". That's not very tall, okay, since the Stone Age. So when you hear about people who are 7 foot tall, yes, it may not be usual by our standards today, but we're not talking about our standards today, you see. This is where they get you. And I've said it many times on my channel, gone on over this on the history of height, okay, on this channel. You see what I'm saying? You have to know about these things, these related topics, like the height and science of height and growth on human beings, which I've gone over extensively on this channel, okay, for mainstream, what their findings are. All right. And so human growth hadn't changed since the Stone Age to 1800. People of extremely short stature by any standards. Okay. Today, we've only grown another 10 centimeters. Average height worldwide now today is only 5'8". Okay. On average. Right. So these people are huge. And the problem is that by scientifically, you have to be able to explain this. Okay, we want to explain our growth, in from the 1800s till now in a modern era with health and food and plentiful and et cetera. So all these factors that they say attribute to growth and height and whatever. Okay, we've stopped growing. They don't know why. Okay, and why were these people so big? It doesn't make any sense when they believe that the average size of human beings has not changed since the Stone Age, the 1800s. All these people of short stature. That's, I'm reporting this to you in one branch of science that's related to this branch of science, but somehow they don't sort of say anything about it other than to say about gigantism and acromegaly in these skeletons, when it's obvious that they don't have any one of these conditions. Their bones are extremely thick, and where the ligaments attach, you can see these people are a muscular frame, not like these frail people suffering from gigantism or acromegaly. Okay, so they're trying to get you to believe that, but that's not true. Okay, so it doesn't say when this report was from, but it says press accounts say, so it's not verifiable, but Chris is doing his best to report on these things. Giant footprints in cathedral-sized cave. This is in Belize, the country where they're bulldozing Mayan pyramids for road fill, and nobody's paying attention. And I reported on this on my channel. It's one of the most popular videos on my channel, although it's quite depressing. They just allow this stuff to go on. That's a country that the U.S. mostly controls, and there's a great deal of tourism that goes on there, and that's all they're really concerned about, not the preservation of these things, apparently. There's a cave in Belize whose entrance and ceiling is as large as a cathedral. The cave was enormous and opens out into the jungle. The Maya people worshipped here and brought offerings. So these are the people who came after another people there before them, who cut very precise stone block and put it together, dry laid stone block with no mortar. And then their culture came along later and have all these constructions made with mortar and small stone or whatever. It's clear that's what their construction technique were. And they're trying to say that these earlier people were the same people, and they were cutting precise stone block, hard block, okay, precisely, right? How is that, how does that figure? So, look, the Mayans, what they attribute to the Mayans in many cases, like the Rio Beck style Mayans, which is baloney, okay? The Mayans didn't do that. The peoples that were there before them, that they probably don't know anything about, the Mayans didn't know anything about, okay? They adopted their whole culture and made it their own. And created, repaired some of these things that were destroyed by something in the past, and created their own style there, and they're attributing it all to the Mayans or the Inca, whoever it was. And it's clear that these people stumbled across these things at a much later time period. Okay, don't fall for that whole Mayan thing. See, people understand down in Peru with the Inca. They've seen a lot of Brian Foster and everything, but I think even what Brian Foster doesn't know, or maybe he does, I don't know if he's discussed it or anything, but I haven't heard him. But what a lot of people don't know is that what they're attributing to many Mayan things that they're giving that attribution to is erroneous, is misinformation. It's not true. These things were there long before the Mayan. Mayans stumbled upon them later on and did their best job in their primitive style, the Mr. Davis, shop class style there, and, tried to repair these things. And it's also down in Peru as well. You can see with the Incahuasis. I've gone over the Incahuasis on my channel too. Okay, Rio Frio Cave is located in the Mountain Pine Ridge area in Augustine, about 5 miles past the Douglas de Silva Forest Station. Upon arrival at the Frio Cave, visitors can park not too far from the entrance, and a short walk reveals the massive 65-foot arched entrance. And it makes you wonder whether that was created or what. It was also home to a giant at one point. Look, I found one of his old footprints. There are stories that the cave was occupied by a giant. Is this artifact in Belize the face of that of a giant? The further back in history you go, the more populated Belize becomes. Currently, the country has a population of about 330,000, but at the height of the Mayan civilization around 1,500 years ago, there were over 1 million people living here. Okay, so this is how the Americas were, folks. Okay, if this is true and it's taken from mainstream archaeology, which I assume that it is, okay, which I've heard before in the Charles C. Mann's books, etc. Okay, there was millions of people in the Americas. Okay, the stone walls of New York, New England, and North America, Eastern North America, reflect this. Okay, millions of people. Okay, the Spanish themselves saying the conquistadors killed over something like 14 and 19 million people. Okay, that's a lot of people to be living here. Okay, so look, your idea that it was sparsely populated in the past is a bunch of nonsense. 95% apparently from the time of the explorers to the settlers and colonists. Okay, that 100-year period. In that 100-year period, 95% of the native peoples of all the Americas died from disease and violence. Carousel is one of the most large and more powerful cities of the Maya world. It covered an area several times that of present-day Belize City and supported more than twice the modern city's population. Here is the evidence verifying the stories of those greater ancestors. So there's the prints there. They're rather large and wouldn't be any sort of average-sized person. Okay, were these the people cutting the precise stone block? Okay, and creating these fabulous structures that look like modern day apartment buildings, some of them, when you look at them, and then you see what the Mayan repaired them and tried to put together the stones that had fallen down and make some sort of artwork or decoration out of it, making these serpent mouth entrances or whatever. But that comes from their culture. It has nothing to do with the culture that was there before them. And you can see in other areas where some of these things weren't quite as repaired and made with these serpent mouths and whatnot. The style of architecture is so fine. It's unbelievable. I've gone over it on my channel. When you look at some of these structures, they rival any day modern building by far. Okay, and it's not made with mortar. It's all finely cut stone. All right. It's not the Mayans that built all those things. It was some other culture that nobody knows anything about. Honduras giant animals and 8-foot man. Explorer hunts fossilized remains of huge animals, 8-foot men. Stories of fossilized remains of huge animals and 8-foot men in Central America and weird native legends about their owners have provided another job for a South American scientific expedition. I wanted to say before about we have to stop thinking about how we built these things. Just have to remember that people of a larger stature, their perception of the world, their perception of their capabilities and all that kind of stuff would enable them to create these structures in a far different manner than we can imagine, because we're imagining at our level. Okay, we would need to do certain things to do it in that way, but let's say we didn't do it, that some other humanoids or human relatives or that were rather large or whatever were the ones responsible for all these things. Well, how much less difficult would it be for them to do it at their size and stature, their power, their power level, and maybe a planet that had a different sort of gravity in the past? It's quite possible. Okay, and this different gravity with somebody of extreme stature moving things around. Okay, maybe it's a lot more easier for them to do it with their size and stature, require less work in the sense that comparatively with us at our size, at our average size. And if all the people before 1800 of average size were 5'3" to 5'5", it finds it hard to believe that you know, they were doing these things with these extreme large stones. But imagine somebody of great stature doing these things. Maybe it's quite different for them. And we have to think about these things. Okay, how can we imagine that at our stature? We can't really, but you have to think about people as big and as strong as an elephant moving some of these things around. Okay, it's when you see the chiefs of the Fiji Island, which I showed you on his channel, the guy looks like Andre the Giant. I mean, he looks like a battle tank, at 7'7", and you can see everything about him is huge. He's not suffering from gigantism, he's not suffering from acromegaly or whatever it is. He looks like he could snap a steel girder in half. Okay, that's what these people were like. It's not like long, frail string beans or whatever it is. They would love you for you to believe that. This is what they're always trying to say when these things are unearthed. Okay, to minimize it, to get rid of it. The Western Hemisphere has been remiss in contributions to paleontology. So when the director of the American Museum of Natural History heard that Paul Alvenet, New Orleans engineer and amateur explorer, had been had seen strange skeletons in Spanish Honduras, there was a flutter in scientific circles. Gregory Mason of the University of Pennsylvania Museum, head of a South American expedition looking for strange monkeys in quest for a theory of man's beginnings, has been asked to investigate the reports. Vance, who spent 23 years in the tropics scouting for banana plantations and railroad rights of way, told Mason of strange things. At Olanchita in Spanish Honduras, he said he found in the slough bank of a creek fossilized bones between 30 and 35 feet long. 30 and 35 feet long. The thing had a skull about a yard long, huge hind legs, and short front ones. Oh, they're talking about gigantic, probably what you would say was a dinosaur. But how old was it? And do we even know what the age of that dinosaurs was? Really, we don't. We don't know anything about the past at all. Huge hind legs and short front ones. Natives said it was the remains of El Abuelo de los Iguanas, the grandfather of the lizards. Ball and socket type bones, 6 to 9 feet long, were seen in the bed of the Rio Colorado, Vanco said, and in a cave on the hacienda of Don Marlana Leyva, ex president of Spanish Honduras in Barbara. He found on a rock platform 11 normal sized skeletons of humans and one he judged to be that of a man about 8 feet tall. Natives whispered legends of the Sismiti, a strange people, woolly like sheep, who frequent caves. Again, a crossover with Bigfoot over here. Maybe. I'm just saying, it seems like from this report right here, but how fascinating is that? Again, this single skeleton who is 8 feet tall, surrounded by people of average height. Okay, again, it so suggests of the unified culture of the past before the native peoples that, as we know, were here, of these large peoples. Okay, that ruled over people who were of average height or whatever, sometime in the past, in cultures and civilizations we can hardly imagine. Okay, so how interesting is that? I mean, as I find that fascinating, and it just again reinforces what I've been saying for a very long time about this culture. And if we're talking about a culture that extends from way up in North America, all through the middle of it, at least to the East Coast, most likely, and to the West Coast, as we've covered on this channel with all the reports of the giants. It's just everywhere. Okay, a completely different story of the past that we don't know anything about. Okay, we're finding out more about that history on this channel than anywhere else. We're trying to put all the pieces together. Okay, and it seems that we had these things going, like the Adina and Hopewell, okay, dynamic going on, the same as the Watusi and the same as the chiefs of the Fiji Islands today, right? Okay, this kind of thing was going on for thousands and thousands of years, most likely. Was there a rebellion against the giants? Did the giants become real terrible people? I'm sure there were tyrants, but it seems to be also stories of the good giants that we don't know anything about. That many of the eastern tribes, okay, the singular tribes, the coastal tribes, had of these good giants. Okay, so this is from 2019, 7'3" skeleton found in 2019, and it covers this show here, Lost Race of Giants, Code of the Wild, Season 1, Episode 3. I don't watch TV, so I don't know anything about it. The Travel Channel series called Code of the Wild, in which hosts Casey and Chris Kiefer investigate quote-unquote mysteries of exploration. In the quote lost race of giants unquote, the Kiefer brothers travel to Ecuador to hunt for what they hope is the lost colony of giants. The Kiefer brothers enlist the former host of History Channel series Search for the Lost Giants, Jim Vieira, who I've talked about many times on the channel. And Jim Vieira thinks that the stone walls of New England were built by these large hominids or large humanoids or giants or whatever it is. That's what he thinks. Okay, and I didn't know that. He just still very recently that's what he thought. I mean, he seemed to sort of lean that way, but never came right out and said it. And then, he did. And that's what I thought, independently of what he thought. So it's, maybe there's something to it. Who knows? Okay, so the Kiva brothers then traveled to see the bones of the quote unquote giant found in the town of Julcoy in the interior of Ecuador. According to Casey Kiva, the skeleton has not been fully excavated or reported in the scientific literature, which its excavators later confirmed. They meet with scientist Theophilus Tokiridis, a geologist and scientist, Florencio Delgado, an archaeologist, both of Universidad San Francisco de Quito, who tell the keepers that they found skeletons taller than us today. They are our first giants, unquote. Delgado tells them that a local man uncovered the skeleton Valdivian layer, below a Valdivian layer. If we can trust that layering, I think the geologists have their layering confused and all mixed up, and it is all mixed up, and it's very difficult for them to really make sense out of it. They see some common things somewhere, but that's the only things they can identify, and they don't know about all the things in between those major events. You see major events, but all the stuff in between those major, what's going on there, it's all jumbled up and all this stuff. Tulcaridis estimates the height of the skeleton at 7 feet. An on-screen graphic says the femur measured 24 inches and the tibia 21. Okay, I'm also going to mention something here that I mentioned before on my channel, and all of us have to remember the people who are into the giants, want to understand about them and all this kind of stuff, okay? The skeletal remains of all these things over the countless millennia and centuries, okay? Skeletons shrink, okay? They lose all their moisture, etc. They shrink. Just remember that. Okay, so all these measurements are really superfluous because they're really what these things started out as. This is what they have to calculate. What if they have some sort of relative measurement that would indicate this shrinkage, okay, on bones, and you could just calculate from that what the real size of these skeletal remains were. Okay, they've all shrunk in size, so that you have to remember that these things were a lot bigger, or somewhat bigger, just slightly bigger than they are. They shrunk a couple of inches, okay, but that's significant overall. Just saying. The academic regression formulas for height are hopeless. The diseased modern giant Robert Wadlow, who because of his disease does not represent healthy height and had a femur length of 28.5 inches. The height using the academic regression formula for Robert Wadlow's femur will put him at 7 foot 10 inches. Wadlow was 8 foot 11 and a quarter. So we are not going to use anything from academia. Academia gets Wadlow's measurement over a foot and an inch wrong. My regression formula has Robert Wadlow around 8 foot 11 and a quarter. Government education is poor and its science departments are worth abandonment. I think 7 feet. It is correct for them to say that the individual was between 7 and 8 feet. A femur that is 24 inches supports a skeleton that is 7'3". The skeleton, when measured properly, should be 7'3". 7 foot 3 inches. If when measured it's not 7 foot 3 inches, then it's probably measured wrong. The 7 feet statement is a low, safe estimate, very conservative, which shows unwarranted respect to the skeptics of giants that bring all their biases. Fulcuritis says no other giant bodies have been found yet. This skeleton belongs to a person that was fully mature in stature. He was an average person of that time. His height was natural, as there has been no evidence of pituitary tumor, which is so frequently today in the crippling condition of gigantism. There is no sign of gigantism, acromegaly whatsoever, just a healthy human being of greater healthy stature. This is the first time any show has actually had a large skeleton to show, far from the truth. Currently in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, you can see the Mutter Giant, which is 7'6". But the most remarkable thing about the skeleton of the American giants is not its size. No, the most remarkable thing about it is how the museum came to own it. And the fact its original user owner is still unknown, although it is referred to as the Kentucky Giant, which matches stories of giant skeletons pulled from Kentucky mounds. The lazy skeptics cry gigantism over and over, which is a go-to word that they don't understand when they have their back to the wall and no way out. And it's so true. That's what they claim, all these things, acromegaly. When I heard the reports, and I'm sorry to say, I heard it on Chuck's channel, and he's reporting on something. It's the same article that I reported from, and I said, this is nonsense. This is what they're saying it is, because they just don't want to admit to the truth of the matter. When you look at these remains, the bones are so much thicker, and the connections of where the tendons go indicate the musculature of these people. Okay, like I said, the chiefs of the Fiji Island looks like they could just bend steel girders, for breakfast and chomp them down, along with some granite and andesite along with it. Gigantism is caused by a pituitary tumor, and while pseudoscientists look at a large skeleton and mislabel it gigantism because of their own shortcomings, it should be known that there is no way to recognize a pituitary tumor externally or with the naked eye. The skulls can be x-rayed. No such photos exist to give credibility to these flagrant claims. A 7 foot 3 inch skeleton of healthy height does not fall in the range of modern humans. Skeletons shrink. Oh, here we go. Skeletons shrink up to 3 inches over time, which means that this 7 foot 3 skeleton came from a 7'6" individual when they were alive. This would make him 99.9% taller than all basketball players. There isn't but two basketball players in the entire history of the league that would be taller than 7'6". That would be George Murison and Manute Bol. Murison would be 1 inch taller, while Bol was only 3/4 of an inch taller. Sign him up. Although the length of the skeleton does not determine the size of that person in life, a person 7'3" is still the tallest of NBA players. Adding 3/8 of an inch to a 7 foot skeleton for skin, fat, muscle, ligaments, etc., would have made the skeleton 7'3" taller than any NBA basketball player in the league in the past three in at least the past 3 years. So it gives the players here that are these heights. Okay, there is not one person in life that is 1 millimeter taller than the skeleton is in death. This skeleton fleshed out is taller than every person in the NBA in the past 3 years. Booyah. So digging through graveyards, you would need to dig up 1,300,000 graves to find one modern individual that was taller than 7 feet. In order to find a person 7 foot 3 inch, the chance you would have to dig 32,500,000 graves to randomly find a person 7 foot 3 in modern times. Minute ball is like the tallest natural height for a modern human being who is 7 foot 6 in height. If his skeleton was dug up thousands of years later, his skeleton, when properly measured, would be 7 foot 3 and 3/4 inches. Menopause femur is roughly 24.9 inches in length. I referred to Menopause as the tallest example for human of modern humans for good reason. That reason that his family shares his height. Pituitary tumors are not hereditary. Everyone else seems to have a height disorder with small siblings and short parents and just hit the lottery for a tumor. Is there anyone taller than Manute Bol that doesn't have a tumor? I would like to know about it. Okay, this guy Manute Bol seems to be one of these guys who inherited or had recessive genes or dominant alleles for tall people like the Watusi people who are real people in real life, okay, that only share their DNA with people within their own aristocratic, aristocratic, aristocratic class. That's what I want to say. Tough getting those words out. Okay, so just think about that. There's not a lot of people that tall in today. So when they say these people were just slightly more robust or give these crummy euphemisms like the Humboldt Museum that houses the Lovelock artifact, like that 14-inch sandal, which they think is just, they think it's just a toy. Just, they made it for no reason. Just make a big old shoe and throw it in somebody's grave. These are the kind of things that William A. Ritchie from New York archaeology had said about these things. It's all nonsense, okay? These people said these things because they have to follow lockstep in line with all the mainstream academics and what they think of Darwinian, evolution and all this kind of stuff, where many things could be caused by different kinds of things. And these are kind of things that we're going to explore later when I get a hold of some of books that I need to get a hold of. But it's very interesting to note that, you know, we often think of these things through the lens of mainstream, often to find ourselves, misinterpreting the past and what went on. Okay, this is about Paraguay and how this also points to this sort of how things get out of line with the actual facts, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, apparently the Comptoir, this two-headed thing I reported about in the Patagonian accounts, because this was essentially why Patagonia. This is a story related to why one of the myths, and we don't know anything about the past, not the real past anyway. Pardon me, I'm taking a drink. But apparently, this is how it gets all botched up because people have misreported these stories and they aren't actual reports. And apparently, the Comptoir story that's supposedly reason why Patagonia was named for what it was named or related to it or whatever didn't really take place there. It took place in Paraguay. It didn't take place in Patagonia, as we're led to believe. And Chris reports about it right here. Currently, the sign, I guess he learned about this or whatever. So currently, this giant is owned by Robert Gerber and his wife in Baltimore, Maryland. Mr. Gerber, however, tells a much different story about the two-headed giant in his possession. According to Gerber, Captois was in fact found already dead on a beach with a massive spear embedded in his chest. The creature was mummified by locals in Paraguay, not Patagonia, until an English captain called George Bickle came across his remains, eventually transporting him to England to a museum in Blackpool, where he stayed under display for several years. Eventually, the mummified remains were transported back to the Americas, to Baltimore. Okay, so he did exist. Does that prove giants were common in the past? Well, while it's certainly possible that such a being may have existed, and Kaptua is most likely real, there is abundant proof of fake giants all around the globe. This, however, does not mean that because one of them is fake, all others are as well. And, people should keep that in mind. It's just illogical to think otherwise. We've heard so many accounts of these things, large skeleton remains, never, besides mummies and mummified remains, etc. The people at Galena Canyon were mummified. Do we hear anything about them? Was anything done about that? They're keeping that all under wraps too, and I go over that on this channel. We can find numerous ancient texts and accounts that mention the existence of giants. Some of these texts can even be found in religious books like the Bible. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of gods came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which are of old, men of renown. Okay, so this stuff in the Bible and everything could very well be reporting of true events, just said in allegory or whatever it is, or told over thousands and thousands of years and thousands of times, and all those kind of these things all get turned into different kinds of things. But what are they really reporting on? And it's evident, when you take all the other evidence into consideration, their advanced tools, etc. Some of these things seem like very advanced tools, like the more advanced civilization of the past, etc. You have to consider all these things as well, and forget about these stories, these simple Bible stories that just recount something, but it's more allegorical than anything, and they don't quite have it right, like Plato's stories about Atlantis and all this kind of stuff. You talked about 1,000 years later or whatever. Did he have it right? Who knows? It just maybe some of it. Who knows? We just don't. So, I talk about these things in the Bible, and, the Nephilim, the sons of men who come, the Nephilim, we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, so we were in their sight in numbers when, Joshua goes there to kill all these people for no particular reason. I don't understand it. A lot of people who read the Bible don't understand why either. They didn't deserve to die. Captua may have been real, and our planet is anything but uncommon when it comes to people with extraordinary height. The tallest man on Earth at the time, when last measured on 27th June 1940, was found to be 2.72 meters. The issue with the two heads can also be explained as conjoined twins are not that uncommon. Well, I don't know about it's not that uncommon, but I think it's fairly uncommon. But I give the example of those girls from the United States there who have the two people in one body, and it's just unbelievable. It is up to you to conclude whether or not something like this is possible, and whether or not the existence of Captua proves that in the distant past, giants did exist on Earth, and there are still many things that remain unexplained on Earth. The Antique Man Ltd. The most disturbing thing about this having two examples by the same name is that each do not get the full merit of credibility that they deserve. The two-headed giant of Baltimore is in fact not Captua. The name Captua is Captain Two in English. Captain Two in the Paraguay language, a language known as Guarani, as McCoy. As for giant, he's talking about, greater ancestors. We will call the two-headed giant in Baltimore, Maryland, McCoy. We would be looking to purchase this item for the Greater Ancestors World Museum for Robert and his wife, assuming that they would give us a fair price. We make no claim one way or the other of the authenticity of this giant, or whether it is human or Nephilim. We only suggest the possibility that the evidence exists, and it's inevitable that eventually we'll find the real McCoy. And maybe, but they don't allow any of these things to be dug up throughout the world. These are the kind of things that they would go to the UN and put a cap on this. No sort of archaeology done with, the native peoples against the native peoples if they exist, and even if they don't exist, they don't want any of these things dug up. They don't want a different past explained or understood by anybody for some reason, and who knows why. So they want to keep the past from us, whatever it might be. But as I've gone over on this channel, folks, the past is far different than anybody can even imagine. Even those Nephilim and Anunnaki stories, they're not quite as fantastic as you can possibly think that they were. More like J.R.R. Tolkien's past than we can imagine, and with maybe even more advanced technology. Who knows? Okay, it certainly shows it from genetic engineering, like such as corn, which may be 80,000 years old or older. Well, that would be impossible by their own mainstream academic standards that people would be capable of this some 80,000 years ago. Genetically engineering corn? I don't think so. But that's what the University of California says. Man's single greatest feat of genetic engineering ever. That's what they say. How is that possible by cavemen? Okay, it's not. Okay, more advanced civilization was around in the past, folks. Much more advanced, higher technology than us. It's just different technology. That's why the alien thing comes into play, because some alternative past or whatever with greater technology would make us think that, but it's not. It's all homegrown. That's what I've been saying. Okay, this is what you don't hear from anybody. They want you to go chasing down rabbit holes, and that's what that stuff is all about. Okay, I'm trying to give you the straight dope here. Okay, and this is one of the places where I think you can get it. Okay, and I leave it a lot for you guys to figure out for yourself. We hear these accounts, you have to make of them what you can. All right, so anyway, guys, that's just these single accounts with some of these countries in Central America and South America here. And we're going to cover some other countries like Bolivia and Peru and elsewhere in South America. Not every country again, and again, that leaves us to our imagination here. But apparently, these drawings can be found everywhere in Central America and South America as well. All right. Anyway, guys, please do like the video if you liked it, and if you're not a subscriber, please do subscribe. Bugcat7 signing off. Peace.